The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Miniature War Games with Battle Games magazine, and by the generous donations of you, the listener. So many thanks to Glenn Oberhouse, Alex McIntosh, Peter West, and Tom Mistola. Thanks, guys. Your donations help make this podcast possible. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 149. Interview with Radio Dish-Dash, with hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Whitaker, and guest Colin Phillips. This show was recorded between the 5th of June and the 11th of July 2015. Welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm Neil Shuck, and on the show I'm joined by my partner in crime, Mike Whitaker. Hi, Mike.
Partner in crime now. I've got promoted. Hey there.
How you doing? You all right?
I'm all right, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I just need to inform you that it's good to see Leicester beating Peterborough at the weekend.
I wish you hadn't mentioned that. I'm just waiting for the start of the NFL season.
For those who may not be in the know, both myself and Mike are big American football fans, in both senses of the word.
He supports some weedy bunch in red on the West Coast.
Indeed.
Well, I support the Vikings.
But it also happened, as I'm sure I've mentioned, my son plays for Leicester Falcons, and their senior team happened to play Peterborough Saxons on Sunday, and won quite convincingly. So
you had to go there again, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I did go there again. Yeah. So I was there and watched it. Yeah. I mean, well, there and watched it. I was on the train crew, mate.
Awesome.
It was a case of, the train crew haven't turned up. Would you mind running the game for an hour?
Here's 10 yards of chain and a flag. Make yourself useful.
That's it. Very much so, yeah.
Well, I'd have come, but I was watching James play his first senior league cricket match, so.
Cool. Oh, yes, and yes, for any Australian listeners, won't mention the cricket.
Sucks to be you.
Cricket is a theme. On this show, we are going to be talking with Colin Phillips from Radio Dish-Dash, who are based in New Zealand. And we recorded that show a couple of weeks ago. And at that time, England was still playing New Zealand at cricket. So cricket is a theme in this show.
Very definitely.
We did happen to kind of mention it on the odd occasion when England were doing well against the Kiwis. Or
weren't, as the case may be.
Yes. There we go. Okay, so we have a theme. Yes, it's wargaming and cricket. Or thereabouts. Anyway, so as I say, on today's show, the vast majority of it is going to be taken up with an interview with Radio Dish-Dash. Now, these are the guys that produced a rulebook a couple of years ago called Skirmish Sangin. But since then, they're now looking at producing a couple of new sets of rules. One covering the Battle of Mogadishu, and also looking at about some stuff about Gen Con as well. I did happen to mention on the Facebook page that we might at some point be talking about Age of Sigmar. That was going to be this show.
Then the other show happened.
And we recorded for 3 hours. And to be honest, also I think the Age of Sigmar subject is quite big.
Also, it is sufficiently late. I have no self-censorship circuits. This may therefore be an unwise time to talk about Age of Sigmar.
Yeah. So in that case,
we're just not going there.
Yes, indeed. In that case, we'll do that another time. Suffice it to say, it's been a hugely entertaining. It's been a hugely entertaining conversation, and it's amazing just how emotive the subject of Games Workshop is, even when you're on a podcast that doesn't normally talk about Games Workshop.
We never did do that epic episode for Hobbsy, did we?
It's still in the pipeline. We are still planning to do it. We'll get there. Anyway, as I say, on with the show. So, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to be chatting with Colin Phillips from Radio Dish-Dash, all about Skirmish Sangin and all the new stuff that he's got coming up.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me.
Sir.
Whoa. Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir.
And we've cooked you some sausages.
Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of Command World War II platoon-level rules from two fat laddies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
Well, we're very pleased to welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast, talking to us from the other side of the world, no less, Colin Phillips. Hello, Colin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How you doing? You all right?
Very good. Morning here and obviously evening for you. So, it's just getting into winter as you're getting into summer.
And let's be clear, so you're in Wellington, New Zealand, yeah?
Yep.
Fantastic. Lord of the Rings country.
Yeah, yes, very much so. Quite a few bits were actually filmed within, 5 miles of Wellington itself. So, there's quite a lot of it here.
Cool. I'm envious already.
It's a beautiful city, even though I say it as someone who lives here.
You may or may not be aware of exactly who Colin is. Colin, along with Craig Watterson, produced, a couple of years ago now, a rulebook called Skirmish Sangin, which is modern combat in Afghanistan. And it's great set of rules. And we've been trying to get him on the show for we exchanged emails and stuff, trying to arrange to get together on the show for a while. Obviously, as you can imagine, being on the other side of the world, logistics are interesting. But we finally got here. So, Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
What we normally do when we have guests on the show is, first off, we find a little bit about how you started in the hobby. So, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into wargaming in the first place?
Yeah, as a young lad in the local library, I came across a book called Skirmish Wargaming by Donald Featherston, and will say this was a life-changing event. It was a book that I took out so many times that in the end I think there was only me being stamped in it, because basically I did it every time, and tried desperately to collect the correct airfix figures to play the little scenarios and things inside it. And then from that, that gave me a love of the idea of skirmish role-playing, skirmish wargaming, and then into role-playing. From there, I kind of moved into, everybody starts with D&D, but I very quickly moved on to RuneQuest. Became a big RuneQuest player for many years. So at this point, I've been wargaming and role-playing. As I kind of got older, it became more and more difficult to wargame, because it was at a time where a lot of people weren't playing anymore, so I tended to concentrate more on role-playing. I got involved quite heavily with a group in London called the Tuesday Nights, setting that up and getting that working, which I was quite happy to see is still going. And then became on the design team for a RuneQuest magazine called Tales of the Reaching Moon. But I kept using RuneQuest to do wargaming at the same time, because it was, he could do man-on-man wargaming. White was far too big to do anything, more than kind of 10 or 15 figures aside. I kept coming back to this idea of skirmish playing. I helped set up Moon Design with Rick Mites, that have now got on with Jeff to become the primary element for Garantha's Hero Wars. And then 16 years ago, I moved to New Zealand, which was kind of like starting again, literally starting again. It's a new life, new place, new home, got to find things out, etc. And over here at the time, Warhammer 40k was just the game that everyone was playing. You couldn't get a game in anything else. So, because I wanted a war game, I bought into 40k and had some great fun and Warhammer Ancient Battles and played Warhammer for quite a bit. And then from there, really kind of got not unhappy with the system, just bored with the concept. I felt there was more to it. The army seemed to be getting bigger. The units, you needed now 40, 50 figures at a time. It was just getting a bit silly. And I've always been really interested in that kind of individual and what they can do in a battle. So, a couple of years ago now, myself and Craig got together to write a set of rules. And that came out about from Ross Kemp's Afghanistan videos. He did a series there. We started watching these because you couldn't get them, because, this was before you could get things easily online. You couldn't get them on terrestrial TV. We had to watch them through YouTube. And so did the usual thing of reverting back to trying to play the thing in RuneQuest and had a lot of fun doing it, but just kept going, this doesn't work. So writing our own.
That strikes me as kind of trying to stretch RuneQuest just a
absolutely.
bit.
Yeah, I completely agree that it was, but it was like, how could you cut it down to a level that you could get quick enough play to actually play the game? And in the end, we just basically said, okay, let's throw RuneQuest away. There are obviously influences with percentage dice, but we threw it away. And came up with a system that we wanted to do, and basically spent 2 years playing with every one of our friends that we could until they were like, they would start to bite when the game began to mature. And then at that point, we said, we think we've got something here, pushed it out to play testers. They liked it. So as a designer, I thought, right, I'm going to design this book and put it out there. So, which is what we did. And we've been steadily supporting it since. Followed it up with Dispatches 1 and 2. We've got Mogadishu coming out with in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we've got our first zombie outbreak game coming out at Gen Con. So, the process is we found a core mechanic that can work at every genre, and the idea now is to explore those genres with those mechanics.
Right. First off, I suppose in some ways you answered the question in the fact of, wondering why on earth you chose Afghanistan, something like Afghanistan in the first place. It's not somewhere that everywhere would start. So that was simply off the back of watching the Ross Kemp videos, yeah?
So we watched the Ross Kemp videos, and one of the things that was really interested in that, and let's face it has come up for its reasonable amount of criticism as things have moved on, is it really showed a kind of new warfare that was very individualistic, and it showed smaller units and what a smaller unit could do. And also, just the great footage of where they're pinned down and you can't see anything, and you just got the fear aspect of the combat. And what we wanted to do is, whether we agree or disagree with any particular wars, we always support the soldiers. We always think, they're out there, they're doing a good job. And so what we wanted to do was represent a game and write a game that they would be happy to either see played or play themselves, right? And actually model those kind of interactions that we were seeing. And we've been very fortunate that through the process, we've had great feedback from genuine soldiers, right? People who've served there. And the feedback to date has been, good on you, mate. It's great. Go for it. And so it's been really good because we've been able to do things. And, the first question people say is, well, isn't it a bit soon? And it's like, well, what's the difference between now and World War II? The guys were still there. They were still doing these great things, supporting each other, being there for each other, etc. And what we wanted to do is trying to show that in a game format without preaching, etc., but still to keep it fun and exciting, and to give you some of those moments where you're going, how am I going to get out of this? Which is why some of the mechanics are written very much, if you take an injury, you have to then medevac the person off the table rather than you can keep playing and taking thousands of casualties like you'd get in Warhammer, So some of those things, that's what we wanted to introduce, and a lot of that came from initially watching, obviously, the Ross Kemp videos. But of course, the more we then started to look at it, we were seeing a lot of the head cams footage that the soldiers themselves were putting on. And this was coming from, everything from the ex-Warsaw Pact Poland companies. It was coming from the US. It was coming from the Brits. It was coming from the Kiwis. So we could actually start to get a feel for what was going on there. And we thought it was quite exciting. And we wanted to show that to players who possibly didn't have such an idea of it.
So how do you go about convincing people to play the other side?
Actually, it's never been a problem. Usually in the demo, if we demo a game, we'll obviously take the tallies. But the concept of, because most games last 2 hours tops, and if you're at a club night and things, people will go, okay, we'll play this scenario and we'll play it one way. And then, okay, we flick it over, we play it the other way. So that you get to play both sides usually here. And also people are quite happy to go, okay, I think that while if you ignore the politics that have gone on, people have viewed the Taliban in some respects a little bit like they did the Viet Cong as a worthy adversary. Not necessarily about their religion and politics aspect, but they know what they're doing. They've been fighting for a long time. And so people are happy to go, okay, in this game, I'll play the Taliban. Or they're insurgents, because of course it's not necessarily just the Taliban you're playing against. It can be Chechens, it can be anything.
The one thing that immediately struck me as soon as you opened the book, it is beautifully produced, by the way. As just as an aside, it is a lovely looking book. It wasn't until you mentioned RuneQuest that all of a sudden you see the influence. Because as soon as I picked it up, and most people obviously when they come along to Wargames Rules, they're familiar with use of D6, potentially use of D10. However, as soon as you start talking D100s, it struck me immediately. That is very much. Well, it struck me as a very much almost like an RPG feel to it, and also the way the combat was designed, where you have these numbered rounds, and then depending on your stats, you go a certain number of times, which for me was very reminiscent of something like 4th edition D&D. I think it was 4th edition. Was the 4th edition one where it was primarily combat based? I think that was 4th edition. Yeah,
I've never played that. I stopped D&D before AD&D. So
I stopped at 2nd edition.
But just to be, if you look at the early Donald Featherston stuff, they were using percentage dice. That was the first time I came across percentage dice. That was my homage back to that aspect. And also percentage dice were a lot more popular early on. And then, of course, with the whole thing of everything becoming D6 based, which I've always been a bit against because I think D6 doesn't give you a nice feel. But also, there is definitely that role player in me that wants to play this not as a role-playing game, but as a system that allows more interaction than like this unit takes that unit, So those aspects definitely came through, and that's why we started calling it a narrative skirmish war game, because we concentrate on the narrative, on the story. Because the one thing that we have is, you finish a game in the evening, you go to the pub for a quick drink, and people aren't telling you about what dice roll they rolled, etc. They're on about, and then they did this, and then and what we were found was really interesting is the war stories. And then, by making them personalized, which figure does what, and they'd give it names, etc. Those stories became almost, easier to deal with, easier to understand what this character was doing. We use the term character because we're playing at an individual man-to-man level, which again is another homage to role-playing games. So you're absolutely right. There is a big, reference between role-playing and wargaming in this. But then you also got to remember that role-playing games came out originally of war games. So, there's always been this connection between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole Don Featherston Skirmish Wargaming book is just chock full of, they're almost little role-play scenarios. There's sort of 3 pages of narrative. They're all got named characters before you actually get stuck into the scenario. And I can definitely, looking at the little sample rule download you've got up on the website, I can definitely see that in the way the characters for the sample scenario are stuck it out. They just look very, very Don Featherston, actually.
Exactly. And to be honest, we've been very clear about this. He has been a great influence on us. And he has been a great influence on me, particularly, for a good many years. And, you know, he did other rules and all other bits and pieces. But I've always kept coming back to this idea of skirmish wargaming. And I think what we're also seeing now is a popularity aspect of skirmish wargaming, because, you know, we all tend to be time poor. So, you know, we played a Confederate game about 6 months ago, you know, ACW game, where, you know, after almost a day's play, there was not really a result. In this, within an hour and a half, 2 hours, there's definitely a result in the game. You know how it played. And I think because we don't have now 2 or 3 days to play something, or even eight or 9 hours to play something, it allows us to play games that are really fun, upbeat, quick to go in. And also, you know, the other aspect being is you don't need $1 million to buy your units. And, you know, it's a small group of units, small set of rules. You can go, you know, you just need a lot of scenery.
You touched on that. So let's go into that a little bit more. Exactly what sort as far as the table size, model count, etc., what sort of thing are we looking at here?
Okay, most of our games, if we're doing a 2-hour game with 2 people, right?
Yeah. We
would play on a 4x4 size table. We would probably have 1 squad for ISAF, so that's usually about 8. Could be 7 if it's French Foreign Legion. Could be 12 if it's the Marines. 1 squad on the ISAF side. And then whatever points they've spent, the opposition will buy those in terms of Taliban. And the Taliban usually get between 15 and 20 figures. So all up on the board, you might have between 20 and 30 figures.
And just to clarify, if you're playing on a 4-foot board, is that usually 28 mil?
Yeah, that's in 28 mil. But we played it in 15 mil and we played it in 20 mil on the same size boards and the same levels of figures. And to be honest, it plays just as well. You know, in 15 mil, you obviously got more room to maneuver. In 28 mil, slightly less room to maneuver.
Yeah.
But it's about, you know, it is a game about using cover. It is about, you know, this is not a game where you stand out in the open, because if you do, you're dead, you know, because we're trying to emulate real rules. You know, you stand out in the open when somebody's got a machine gun, there's not much hope for you. You know?
You must have been watching my son play Call of Duty. He doesn't appear to have heard of cover.
Yeah, well, of course you can respawn, right? Because I've got a 16-year-old who does the same thing. It doesn't matter how many times they get killed, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Whereas, you know, games that we play, well, that's a casualty and that counts against your points, you know? And that's what we were trying to do, is to get that feel. And that's why, you know, in a 4x4 table, ranges of weapons just don't count. You know, they're completely immaterial. So you don't have to go, is this? And the other aspect we did as well is I got a bit annoyed where there was this, and it goes right through wargaming, is the 6-inch template for grenades. You know, you can find it everywhere. Now, if you ever look at a real grenade, you actually look at what these burst damages are, they're enormous in comparison. And we used the real figures and put them into the game. And now people will throw a grenade and go, gosh, I didn't realize that was the effect of it, because now it really makes a difference, right? And now, you know, if you're in that 5-inch kill zone, you're not going to last very long. But you're then into a 15-inch radius damage zone, you know? So straight away, it can have a big effect on a game, yeah?
Of course, especially on a 4x4 board, that takes up a lot of room.
But the one thing about Afghanistan is that the combat has always been very close, right? Because it's usually around ambush, it's usually around finding people in compounds. You know, I mean, look, there's probably as much combat at a distance as there is close up, but all the things that we watched originally were those kind of more close up aspects, and that was what we were playing. Now, if we've got a couple of people, so if we've got 4 of us playing, we might go as far as having a platoon on the ISAF side, right? Because 4 people can handle a platoon pretty easy, right? And we'll actually add vehicles, helicopters, all sorts of things. So we've had games go where between 4 of us, we've had 60 figures on the board, and we've been playing on a 10-foot by 8-foot board. So it does scale up nicely as long as you've got people to help you out, right? And we have a lot of fun because we can have groups where we can have a bigger group or a smaller group, depending on who's around and who wants to play. And that was the other thing being, is there's a lot of elements that you can buy within your points is off-the-table support for both sides. You know, you can have off-the-table snipers because, you know, if you look at a sniper on a 4x4 table, it's just not going to exist. So that means he has to be off table. So he has to be called in, right? Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, we sat down and had a debate about snipers, and we worked out the longest shot in 28 mil ever made by a sniper would be something like 38 feet. So, that gives you the idea why the sniper isn't on the board, right?
Yeah.
So now it's something that or is on Overwatch, you know what I mean? So it's those kind of things that we've tried to add into the game to put the flavour of the real event. But the truth of the matter is the system can play in any modern combat, hence the reason we're now moving into Mogadishu. But we based it in Afghanistan because, A, it excited us originally, but also we felt it was a really good place to start because, if we then try to give you lists for everything, well, there'd always be something missing. Afghanistan had a reasonably tight list. We could put the majority of things in and use that as a basis. And then we also wrote rules in there and showed you how to make your own lists. How do you make your own all bats? So if you wanted to go and do Somali pirates who are taking over a ship, you could very quickly come up with that for an insurgent group and for the, whether it's the Chinese, the US, the Canadians, whether it's the New Zealanders who are boarding the boats, all these kind of things. So the rule system will allow you to do any modern combat.
Backtracking a bit, I was noting that one of the nice things about the original basic role-playing system and descendants of it is it's harder to minimax because there aren't so many stepped levels in things, which makes for a smoother feel, I think, to this kind of system. You can go up just 1% in skill rather than 12.5% or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the elements that I like most about it, is when you've done a few platoon patrols, right, you suddenly see that there are certain people in there beginning to shine, right, within your platoon. And a couple of times what we do kind of small campaigns is we'll put a platoon in an FOB, a forward observation base, right? And then we'll be taking those the individual squads out in bits and pieces as well as bigger games on patrols and you actually begin to see your characters develop. Some of them obviously get wounded enough have to be evac, but you get that aspect of campaign aspect that probably is a little bit more like the role-playing game where, now my character's done this, now my character's gone there. And it helps that kind of story aspect that we've talked about, the narrative.
Yeah, and the fact that you can actually have more steps, and I'm not slighting any games in this, than just raw veteran elite or green regular elite.
Yeah, I mean, we use novice, average, veteran, elite as starting points, but we've got characters now that started at average and are just as good now as any elite because they've been out there fighting for lots of games. Whereas others, never get past the first game because that's unfortunately the luck of the dice.
I was talking about the way the turn sequence works and stuff, which is it's very different from what most people would expect, even from skirmish games. You talk about handling of individual figures as opposed to fire teams or sections, and it's not. Even if you play things like alternate unit activation, you would normally be expecting to activate multiple figures at the same time. And this works slightly differently, doesn't it?
Yeah. So just for anybody who hasn't played it, just a few basic aspects. There is each turn is broken down into 10 combat phases. And depending on the character's body rating is depending when they're active within those combat phases. So if you've got a body rating of 20, you would be active on combat phase 1, combat phase 3, combat phase 5, and combat phase 7, right? So without trying to go into too much detail, that just gives us an overview. And what that would mean is if I've got several people who have a body rating of 20, we'd roll D6 to see which order they go in because it can make a difference. And obviously, that's not just the ISAF forces going on the 20. Also, the insurgents will be on the same levels, right? So any 20s in the insurgents are active at the same time. So we quickly decide what the order of the people is, and then they move those. And then we go down to the 19s, the 18s, 17s, and we work through the group. Now, why it sounds a lot, most averages, right, is you tend to get groups together. Right, and also when you're trying to put fire teams together, you can. One of the rules in dispatches number 1 is about linking the team all to one body rating. So you can actually move 4 people together or individually or separately. And this allows you to set groups up to do cover while others move forward. It allows, some to run forward and kneel and then somebody else to run beyond him and then he kneels. And what we tried to do is make it that we could emulate modern day tactics as closely as possible on the board. And what we found is if you model those tactics, it works for you. If you don't, you tend to get punished in game terms. So that was the basis behind it. We tried to produce this combat phase table that would make it relatively easy to use. And we basically just have one person will be counting off the phases and then it go on to the next person and the next person, because it's just a sheet and you're just basically moving the dice along the sheet to say where we are. And then everybody knows who's active and then they all activate and then next combat phase, all the next people activate. And we go through that and, in any one activation, everybody has 4, active combat phases out of the 10. So it means that if you didn't go early, but you went later, you're going where some of the other guys can't. So it's actually advantageous to have both ends of the spectrum. You might be slightly slower to go, but now you're suddenly kicking in because now it's your turn and you can actually do things while the others have already gone and spent their AP to do things. And so you can react to that. So, it's those kind of things that we're looking at. So it does make it very tactical in the way you play. You have to think about because your body rating is randomly generated. So once you've got all that sorted, you've got to go, okay, how am I going to work these teams? And who's going to cover, who's going to do what? Because if you put them correctly, you can make it that you're always constantly pushing forward with as much firepower as you can whenever you need it. But if you once get out of whack, you suddenly are then you're on the back foot because now you've got a couple of turns where you've got nothing active and the insurgents are coming at you. And, to give you an idea, if they spend 3 AP running at you, they've just moved 18 inches. On a 4 foot by 4 foot board, that's a lot of distance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you've got those kind of things happening.
Well, as I say, it makes the game incredibly interactive, doesn't it?
That's the one thing that people talk to us a lot about is initially when people look at the rules, they go, this is really complex. And we go, actually, it's not. Just play it through. By the time you play at the end of the first game, you'll have it in your head and you'll actually be remembering the percentages. But and because we have a combat phase table that you work through and that does all the work for you, you're good to go. You don't have to keep that kind of knowledge in your head. You only just have to know which ones of your team are active and when they're activate. So it does allow for that kind of, you happen to do something, I happen to see you doing it, I get the chance to shoot you, I miss, but now I've suppressed you because anytime you get shot at, you take morale markers, and your morale markers, basically, after the first one, each morale marker is minus 10% to your morale. And so it can get to the point where you pin people simply by shooting at them. In Skirmish Sangin, you don't have to hit and kill to have a big impact on your opposition. Simply putting close fire, especially with heavy weapons, is enough to pin or even sometimes break them. So it's not about you have to destroy them to the last man. You literally can actually get them they're starting to retreat now because they simply can't take the withering fire, yet you haven't actually hit anybody. And that's what we, rather than build suppression fire and Overwatch, etc., we built that into the core mechanic so that, the very elements of the mechanic allowed us to do that without having to go, now this is suppressive fire, now this is this, now this is that. And it also means things like, like machine guns, like mini-me's really pack a punch, or 40 mil grenade launchers, M203s, really make a difference. They can break big attacks up, So that's what we were trying to get. And because of the phases, it allows these aspects to come in and, it does dictate the way the game plays. But once you get your head around that, people always come back and are really pleased with it because it allows them to do things. I mean, like I've said before, we had people who've been there who've come and played it and they're going, yeah, this is great. This is just how we used to do things. So that was probably the biggest compliment we could get after we wrote the rules. Yeah.
You're saying that, okay, the base rules came out and then you've gone through Dispatches 1 and 2.
Yep.
So what's contained in each of those publications?
There's nothing worse than you buy a set of rules and they come out with a supplement and the supplement changes the rules. Yeah. So now you're like, well, if I don't have this supplement, I don't have the full rules, right? So what we tried to do is obviously Skirmish Sangin is 172 pages. We crammed just about as much into it as we could, but there was always more. Couldn't get it all in. It would have been a hell of a weighty tome if we'd have tried to get it all in. So what we then did is we added the extra elements. So, for instance, in one of the dispatches, and I can't remember off the top of my head, we put canines in, the dogs, and how they can find IEDs, because IEDs is quite an important part in the game. We had extra all bats. So, like in dispatches 1, we've got the Canadians, the Germans, the AMP, and a mercenary militia that's known as the 611 militia.
Yeah.
We filled them full of scenarios as well. So, like, again, just because I've got it in front of me, dispatches number 1 has 7 different scenarios with all the stats for all the figures in there. So they're good to go. You can play them as they are, or you can actually use your own teams that you've had previously. And things like explanations around, why our action point system works the way it does. Is it time-based? A lot of people have come back and said to us, is this a time-based system, etc.? And it's an explanation about what that is, right? So,
yeah.
And then we're very lucky, like I say, we have a few military friends, and a couple of them wrote tactical primers for Sangin. So, now there's a document in there written from a soldier's point of view going, this is the best way to do the following patrols, right? So now you can read and go, okay, now I'm going to mirror that and see how that works in my game, yeah? So we've tried to go for, and it's not a word I like, a sense of realism, because it can never be real, right? But a sense of realism where real tactics will pay off for you. And so the additional elements in both dispatches 1 and 2 basically add or, fill out the things that we couldn't get all into the first books,
So, how's it actually gone as far as the game is concerned? I mean, you were saying that it's been really well received when people have played it.
Yeah.
Has it been a good success as far as the actual rules are concerned?
We had a small problem because we live on the other side of the world, right?
Well, I was going to say could be because we've known from other from other companies things like when you start hitting like shipping costs from New Zealand and various other bits and pieces like that, things tend to get a little bit problematic, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you got to remember the Battlefront has a much bigger pocket because the person who's behind Battlefront was a millionaire before he started Battlefront. So,
and probably isn't now.
Well, I won't make any comment about that. But what I'm trying to say is, they had a decent fund, should we say, right?
Yeah.
We give why I've tried to fund this as much as I can. I have a daytime job, and that basically fund. It's as much as my wife will give me is the amount of money I get to put into this. So. What we've had to do is, so for instance, the first 12 months was all about trying to find people who would help us distribute, right? So we very quickly set up a distribution arm in the UK and the USA. Instead of everything gets printed here and it all gets moved offshore, we started printing in the UK and we started printing in the USA. Because it's digital files now, moving them around, it's really easy to do. Yeah. That was successful, and we managed to get books to both markets at a reasonable local cost, right? We try to keep the cost across the board the same, but when I say a local cost, so pounds or dollars as opposed to New Zealand dollars, right? So we've tried to cut down on that level of shipping for it. So, if you're in the UK or Europe, you can get something sent out of the UK at a reasonable amount of money, right? Same thing in the US. Right. So that worked. And then obviously we stepped into making our own figure range. Okay. And we've been building up on that. Now, initially, just to be different, and obviously because we come from New Zealand, we started off producing the first Kiwis in 28mm. Nobody had ever done it before. And it's good that they double up as Aussies because most people buy them to play them as Aussies. But, so they were our first figures, and then we followed those up with the Taliban, and now we're following those up with the Rangers for our new project, Mogadishu, Maalintii Rangers, but they also work for early Afghanistan. So, the Tora Bora raids and things like that. These Rangers will work for them. So we've been building those aspects up and trying to tie in and have business deals with people and get distributors. So, for instance, we're very lucky that Empress stocks our books and figures. Other people stock our books. In the USA, we have a full-time distributor who's pushing out there. And again, we came to Salute last year, not the one gone previous year. And we did very well there, and we got interest. But it is very difficult when you're here to try and attract attention. So what we have concentrated on has been the social media side of things. So we set up the Skirmish Sangin blog, which is phenomenally successful. We have 50 to 60,000 hits a month on Elements, so we do that. And in that, we give away free scenarios every month.
Yeah.
We have also pushed Facebook Skirmish Wargaming page, so it's sponsored by Skirmish Sangin, but we cover all Skirmish Wargaming, and we push that out there. You know, and the idea being is about getting known and obviously we've done advertising in the magazines and things, but it has been one of these slow climbs, you know. The first 12 months was really hard. The second 12 months has begun to turn. This year, it's really begun to turn. And because we offer it as both PDF and printed books, if you buy a printed book of us, the first thing we do is send you the PDF, so you've got that while you're waiting for the book to arrive, or you can just buy the PDF. So a lot of times we've had people who've bought the PDF, liked it, and they've sent me an email saying, I bought the PDF. Can I now buy the book? But I don't want to, can I just pay the original cost? Because I've already gave you X amount of money. And it's like, well, you know, we do give you the option at the beginning, PDF or the book. So, you know, those kind of things have you know, little elements that you have to learn as you're setting up a business, you know. Fortunately, I'm a part owner of another business, so I've got a decent amount of business skills. But this was a new market for me, if you like, because up until now I'd only ever done kind of with Tales of the Reaching Moon fan fiction in terms of for RuneQuest and things like that. I'd never done anything that was marketing my own products out there. And it's fair to say that it has turned the corner and is doing well, right? But it could always do better. And, you know, the next two products we see as broadening the range and hopefully getting more people involved. And so, like I say, the next product very quickly is Maalintii Rangers, which is Day of the Rangers in Somali. Because we call it Skirmish Sangin, we thought we'd play on the same aspect, Maalintii Rangers, so we're still using the local language.
Right, okay.
And also, for a lot of people who perhaps were too sensitive about the concept of it's in Afghanistan and it's now, this is going back, 10 years, 15 years? It takes a little bit of the aspect away from it. So in this case, when we launch, we're going to launch with range of Rangers. That's a bad way of saying it, but a range of Rangers and Deltas at the get-go once the book is launched at Historicon. And I'm going to Historicon this year to launch it. And then we're going to Gen Con, which is only a few weeks afterwards, to launch the Outbreak zombie game, which has a slightly different mechanic, but is based on the core mechanics of Skirmish Sangin. So, you know, it's all about, if you like, growing the concept and the business, and getting more people involved. But from a Skirmish Sangin point of view, the game is going well. We've got a really busy forum. We've got a really busy blog. We get a lot of Facebook feedback. And, you know, when we do go to shows, people come over and have a good chat with us and, oh, yeah, I really like your game. And so word on the street is it's a good game. I think our problem is still there are people out there who haven't heard of it. Hence, one of the reasons for talking to you. You know, it's about getting people to be aware of us so that they can try the game.
We mentioned it a couple of times now. So, next thing coming out in 3 weeks from now? We're recording this on the 5th of June, isn't it? So it's basically coming out end of June.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Day of the Rangers.
Yeah.
What made you choose Mogadishu?
So, always been a huge fan of war movies, right? And read the original Black Hawk Down book when it came out. And
which is superb.
Absolutely, yeah. But you know, it's just one of those kind of seminal books that tells you about modern warfare, right? And this was, you know, obviously pre-Afghanistan. So, you know, because now we have a raft of books on modern warfare. This was kind of when it came out, and then obviously the film followed, and it is just one of those moments in time that, again, ignoring the politics, we never want to get involved in politics. It's a fantastic battle because it's very different from any battle that you would ever normally come across. It has all sorts of idiosyncrasies within the battle. It has all sorts of ideas of the scenarios because obviously the choppers go down. You've got you've got convoy trying to rescue them. You've got the issues around communication. So it's got a number of things in it that kind of allude to the fact that this was going to be fun to try and write a rule set around. Now, because we had a core rule set, this is a supplement to Skirmish Sangin. You need Skirmish Sangin to play. The additional rules are only for that genre, right? They're only for, so, up until now, we haven't needed rules for mobs. Now we needed a rule for a mob, right? So we had to work mechanic out and play test that, etc. So, unfortunately, Maalintii Rangers or Day of the Rangers is not a standalone product, but you do need Skirmish Sangin. But it allows people to take Skirmish Sangin in another direction, and it also show them how we've taken it into another direction. So if they wanted to do, like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, the British raid in Africa.
In Sierra Leone?
Yeah, the Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
There should be enough information now around the helicopters, enough information around the teams that you could sit down and go, actually, based on the information I've got, I can actually make the tweaks to play that game, Or if you wanted to do an SAS raid, the Iranian embassy seat, there is now enough information out there to play these games. And so what we're calling these battle books, because we've taken a particular battle, in this case, Day of the Rangers, and we've gone to town on it. And it's an 80-page book. It'll have a lot of detail, we always start with a bit of history, so in case people are not up to date with it, and then it works through all the process, so that at the end of it, the book, there are a number of scenarios to play. You've got all the all-bats, everything you need to set up, and you're good to go. So that's the concept behind it. It's to take a battle and really look at it in detail. And this is our number one book for this, right? We see battle books. We're going to try and come out with a battle book once a year because, I know people kind of want things once a month, but because there's only me and Chris now, because Craig has left to go on to do his own thing. We both have full-time jobs. The writing, the research, and the playtesting takes quite a long time. And because we have other elements that we want to do as well. So, our aim is to kind of come up with a battle book once a year, is to come out with the dispatches once a year, and also usually a new product once a year. So, we're putting ourselves under the metal to try and push it out there and to keep the quality up. I think from Skirmish Sangin to Maalintii Rangers, and if people want to have a look, if they go to the Skirmish Sangin blog, you can see the cover and some of the internal details. The design, the illustration, etc., has all stepped up another level. And so as our figure manufacturer, we've really gone to detail in working out the figures now. They're much better than they were, and our other figures have been highly regarded, but these are the next step up. So, we're every time we're trying to get the best quality we can get for as reasonably priced as we can do it without being super expensive. So that's the process that we've been going through, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So Maalintii Rangers will be the first of these kind of battle books, these first spin-offs in these elements. And there are definitely things within the movie that we haven't written those scenarios for, because obviously, again, you're limited to the size of the book. And we will be releasing them as free scenarios like we do for Skirmish Sangin over time.
Right, cool. So, obviously, developing rules.
Yeah.
Why did you suddenly go, okay, right, so now we need to manufacture minis as well? Or is it just one of these things that it always seems that if people have buying a rule set, the first question they ask is, okay, the rule set is great, but what do I play them with?
Yeah. In the US, that has definitely been one of the questions we've asked. I love your rule book. What minis do I use to play it? Now, up until this date, we've always been going, okay, go buy Empress or do this or etc. before we had our own miniatures. And still and one thing that we're very clear about, Eureka and Empress miniatures are wonderful miniatures. We love them to bits. We play with them regularly. We mix them with our own. We're not saying this is one of these games that you have to play with official miniatures. Not by any means. You play with whatever miniatures you want at whatever scale you want. We're very adamant about that, right? Recently we've been working with Flytrap, who do 15mm miniatures, right? Because there was a groundswell of interest in playing this game in 15mm, and it plays equally as well, right? So the scale of figure actually is immaterial. We have been asked about playing it in 1/300 scale, but I think at that point it probably would break the mechanic. But good on you if you want to give it a go. But 15, 20mm or 28, it will play really well. And so what we're trying to do is to our audience, we're saying, okay, you don't have to buy ours, you can buy anybody's, but at the same time, here are our figures, and we try to make them the best that they can be. And it gives us another, it was something that we were always interested in, and we like to buy figures. I'd like to say we like to paint figures, but I don't like to paint figures. I like to get somebody else to paint my figures. But I do like to buy. I've got a lot of unpainted lead, just like every wargamer in the world. So, we like the idea of going there, buying figures and bits and pieces. And we thought, okay, let's give it a go. So initially we started with Ebob as our sculptor, and we still use Ebob. Yeah. And he did fantastic set of Kiwis, and he did a fantastic set of Taliban. They're really, I didn't do them, so I think, although I sell them, I think they're the best ranges, and it's nice that they're in our stable. But just beautiful figures. And then we've started recently working with a sculptress in the USA because we wanted to do 3D sculpts. And the reason for 3D sculpts is when you have a physical sculpt, it is very difficult to move it around the world to get it cast. Because obviously it has to get cast in the US, has to get cast in the UK, has to get cast here. So we came up with a process, and it took us a while to learn the process. So we now do 3D masters using a 3D printer. So we have them created as a 3D program, put output on a 3D printer to a very, very high quality. And then we use those as our masters to cast the figures. Now, obviously, that's been an 18-month learning process. These Rangers that are just coming out are the first of those. And, I'm sure you've done in Kickstarter like we have. You bought Kickstarter based on the renders, and you got the figures to them, and you thought, not really very good. We've made a point of going, okay, this is the render. Now, what's the final figure like? It is the same as the render. So we've done a lot of testing backwards and forwards to try and get that as accurate as possible. So, and when we launch, you'll see that we'll push out there. We'll be showing the kind of render and the metal figure next to each other, so you can see how close they are. So the idea moving forward, because we are going to Kickstarter Maalintii Rangers.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, we are going to Kickstart it simply because we're a small company. We only have X amount of funds. Anything that we can get in to help grow ranges of figures. So the idea is the book is complete. It's just not waiting for its photography. But the idea is we'll give the book and extras and bits and pieces to people for their pledges, and take that money to expand the figure range. So that's what we're trying to do with it. Because obviously it all costs money.
The 3D sculpt does give the option materials other than metal, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you can look at all sorts of different elements. If nothing else, actually 3D sculpts. A couple of times to do things specifically, we've printed one off and painted them, and they paint beautifully. We've cast them in resin, we've cast them in metal. We've got a very good caster in the US now who has got that handle. We used to have an extremely good caster in the UK, but unfortunately, and don't really want to go into too much detail. Unfortunately, he passed away, and since then we haven't gone down that route.
Yeah, no, you mean
because obviously families and things, you don't want to bring things up anymore. But we were working at one point heavily in the UK, but now we've moved all our figure production into the USA. Now, while that can be kind of annoying if you're in the UK because you have to pay US import costs, their mail is pretty cheap. It's almost as cheap as the UK. So because our figures are slightly cheaper than everybody else's, you're really only paying the same money. We bought it in the UK, and we keep a certain amount of those figures in the UK. It's only when we run out that things have to be sent from the US. So that's the process that we try and do. So what we're trying to do is keep it as economical as possible for people to join the game, play, but at the same time fund the next rounds of development.
Got you. Yeah, because one thing like with Maalintii Rangers, of course. There's been one major scenario book that I'm aware of that's done it before, and maybe a couple of figure ranges, but they were all produced 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Or at the very least 5 years, anyway, between 5 and 10 years ago. So obviously, with the way that mini manufacturing has moved on, and all techniques have moved on, we haven't actually seen a modern range of Rangers, Deltas, and Somali mobs for that particular conflict, have we?
No, not currently, and and Wild Gripping Beast have just rebrought theirs back into production. We think, there are not many people in the market, but that's not really the reason we went into it. We went into it because we just liked the period so much and we wanted to do our own figures. And, and I'm adamant about this is you don't have to use our figures to play our games. We've been so annoyed at that in the past that we've said to people, just play the game, enjoy it, I mean, a lot of people say to me, oh, how does it play in terms of force on force, right? Our game. Now, if Force on Force had been the game I wanted it to be when I bought it, and this is no critique on Force, because I think they did a beautiful design job and the structure, etc., there would not be a Skirmish Sangin. But because I read those rules and went, this doesn't do what I want, that's not to say it's wrong, doesn't do what I wanted, I went out and wrote my own rules. Okay? So, they're the start, if you like, of the modern influence of gaming, and we should always take our hats off to that. And acknowledge that. But we took it down a slightly different path, just like, Lardies are now producing their rules. There's in this year alone, there seems to be about 4 or 5 different sets of rules at different scales. The whole point being is that everybody should be able to, the more we can have a bigger genre, the more it is good for everybody. So I look at it, I don't view it as like we're all in competition. I view it as, we're all here trying to have fun. And that's the aspect behind it. So, and again, no critique to FOF. If you play it a lot and that's your game, all the best to you. It just didn't do what I wanted it to do. Hence the reason I wrote my own rules. So again, the same thing with the figures. You can use my figures, or you can use and mix them with somebody else's, or you can use somebody else's. I think we've got to stop this mindset of that has come, basically out of the Warhammer house, which is, if it's not official figures, you can't use it. We've got to get back to playing and enjoying games. And that's my passion with it.
Whistle, stamp, cheer, wave pom-poms. I'm all for that one. That's one of the nicest things I've heard someone say about their own set of rules in a long time, actually.
Well, you've got to remember at the end of the day, we play games, right? I'm not one of these people that writes a game and sends it away and it never gets played again. I play Skirmish Sangin regularly, okay? And when I say regularly, at least once a week, okay? As well as playing, the final playtests for Outbreak, as well as we, obviously did Maalintii Rangers and playtested that to the nth degree, as well as other secret projects that I'm not allowed to talk about. We try and keep adding these games and playing them because at the end of the day, we love playing games, and that's what we want to pass on to everybody else, the love of playing the game. And going out there and having some fun. And it's a great social event, is to sit down with your mates and have a game and a laugh. And that's, to me, is what this is all about, is I'm trying to enable that as much as possible.
And whilst you say you don't need to buy your figures to actually play the game,
yeah.
Your new Ranger Masters do look very, very nice.
Well, thank you. It's took a long while to get to this point. I will say this, right? But, the idea now is, you can see the new Masters. The idea now is to keep building on those, what I think are really nice figures, and to give people a really good range. And the reason for 28mm is because that's our favourite scale. And, if you're a 20mm person or you're a 15mm person, good on you. But for us, we're 28mm, so we tend to want to create figures in that element. But we're aware, there are. One of the reasons we work with Flytrap, not just because they're also in New Zealand, is because there was a groundswell of people saying to us, "Can we play this game in 15mm?" It's like, yeah, absolutely. And here's the figures to do it. They're not our figures, but they're really cool figures.
Of course, they've done things like with these free scenarios that you've been releasing on the blog. They've been releasing figure packs for each scenario, haven't they, and stuff like that?
Yeah. So the last two, Anton, the guy who owns Flytrap, the last two has created those, and his long-term goal is to go back for the first two and do those as well. But now every month, what we do is we tell him what the scenario is and give him the outline, and so he's in production making the figures while we are finalizing the scenario, and then it comes into design layout that I do and pull all the whole things together. And then we try and push it out within the month. And if you look at the blog, you can see that the last one only just got in because it was a very busy month with obviously Historicon not being far away. It was technically in the Northern Hemisphere, but it was technically late in the Southern Hemisphere. So we only just got in by the skin of our teeth. But Anton was ready, and he had his figures up there, and it's like, when the scenario comes out, guys, here's the figures in 15mm for you to play. And it's great that he looks at, he basically has a month to turn around the figures, and he does. And these are not things, we're not writing to his figure range. We write stuff and send it to him, and he then creates to our thoughts. So that's been really, really successful. And it just to show the quality of Flight Trap, that they can turn it round that quickly and to have that level of, really good figures. So we think that's kind of a good symbiotic relationship between the two of us. We help sell his figures. He helps sells our rules. He's introduced us to other people. We've introduced him to other people. It's about that, coming together and trying to find ways that all the companies can get stuff out to players. Yeah.
So you mentioned Historicon, and you mentioned the word Outbreak a couple of times.
Yes.
Because everything's better with zombies.
Everything's better with zombies.
Oh, it is. It is. Trust me, it is.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just briefly tell you about Historicon is going to have the Maalintii Rangers launch. I'm in the US for that. I'm going to stay in the US to Gen Con, where we launch Outbreak, Skirmish Outbreak.
Oh,
right. Okay. So that one launches at Historicon and one launches at Gen Con. And so I'm going to be in the US for about 3 weeks, which I'm not complaining about. Especially as it's in the middle of winter here and it'll be in the middle of summer by the time I go there. So that'd be great. So at Gen Con, we're launching Skirmish Outbreak, which is our take on the zombie movies. Now, we've got a mixture of elements in that. What I mean by that is there's a whole raft of zombie movies from the original Romero movies right through to kind of Zombieland through to 28 Days and 28 Days Later. And there's all sorts of and then you got TV series. There's all sorts of elements, right? And the real mythos of the zombies is now merged into different ways. So there's no kind of one true way with zombies. So what we've looked at is we've created our own mythos, and our mythos comes about is that we love 28 days and 28 days and 28 weeks later, right? We love the rager aspect. Okay. So we've got our zombies, right? In the first 48 hours of life as a zombie, if that makes sense, because they're dead, they're raging, right? So they're racing around trying to infect. They're super active. And post 48 hours, they're more the kind of typical Romero shambling style zombies. So the game has this aspect in it that you start off with a zombie controller and you start off with players, right? And so if you're going to play a 500-point game, you'd have a 500-point group of survivors, which means the zombie controller starts with 10 zombies plus 1 zombie for every 100 points you've got. So they start with 15 points. So 15 zombies on the board. Every time you go into a building, you have to roll to see if there's additional zombies. Every time you make a noise, you have to roll to see what we call the zombie chain, which begins the process of creating more zombies and more zombies racing in towards you. But these are all Zeds. These are all the shambling type of zombies. Any character that gets bitten and turns becomes a rager. And so now it becomes a super zombie, for want of a better word, right? It's much quicker. It's much faster. It's much more aggressive. And it's only got one thing on its mind: kill. Right, where the slower zombies will wander around until they find you and then they want to eat, right? So it's this concept of mixing the two in the mythos. So we've created our own little mythos background as trying to sort that out to give the idea of a lot of fun, So it's not just, because there's nothing worse than being able to just keep outpacing the zombies. They're slow, so I'll just keep moving, and they keep shooting, and they never catch me. Now, the minute one of you gets bitten, you've got a rager. He's moving just as quick as you are, and he's really not happy. And so, it breaks the game up and gives some more aspects to it. So this is some of the elements, and I'm not going to give everything away, obviously, because there's a few things still in the element. But that's the kind of zombie game it's going to be. And we've been doing a lot of play testing, and the one thing that we always find with our games is there's always a lot of laughter. People enjoy it. There's been a lot more laughter with Outbreak, and the fact that when it's a successful game is when your play testers are saying, do you fancy a game at the weekend? Which is not a play test. It's like, just want to play? Let's go play Outbreak. And we've had a lot. Okay. So, people go, oh, can we get a quick game of Outbreak? They say, okay, fine. So this time we've had testers in the UK, the USA, and obviously New Zealand, our own crew. We've had a lot of feedback. we're pulling that all together, and I've just this morning finishing the layout of the book. So, we're just going through that process of putting the whole thing together. So we're quite excited about it. We think it'll be quite different. It's a slightly different mechanic. It'll have a lot of the things that people are aware of from Skirmish Sangin, but it is a slightly different mechanic. In this case, we're using a D20 instead of a D100. And also we've changed some of the elements because obviously zombies need their own concepts and elements to deal with. But we think, there should be enough similarity that people like one will like the other. And also it still plays on that individual level of characters. You have your band of survivors, which can be 1 or 2 or up to about 5 with 500 points, after which, you've got to, do they survive? What happens at the end of each game? They have to find resource points when they go out on the board. If they don't get enough resource points, then they end up with the negative scenarios. So, illness, all these kind of things. So it's a game about going out there and getting, things to provide for you, which is, the root of all the zombie movies, right? You've got to go out there and find things in this lost world to survive with. So that's always the part that we've pushed, and we try, because we love apocalypse games. And so this is the first in those kind of feel that we're looking at.
Right.
And that will be launched at Gen Con. So that will not be available anywhere in the world until Gen Con. And then it will launch at Gen Con, okay. And then after that, obviously, we'll go on a global push,
And are you producing a particular range of figures for that?
We are currently producing a range of survivors because we think there are lots and lots and lots of zombies out there, and people have their own favourite zombies. The one thing that we not aware of is that anybody creating rages. So we are currently creating rages as well. The issue with that is they will not be available for Gen Con. It has just been too hard to make them. The book will be available and some of the figures, but the rages won't be available for Gen Con. They will come shortly afterwards. But it's just the way that some things work. Some things get there on the day and some things have to come, a few weeks later. So we will be producing a set of rages and a set of survivors. But we'll leave the zombies to, basically to buy anybody else's zombies because, it's a big market. It's glut. Nobody needs any more zombies. And again, because we're saying, use anybody's, we're more than happy for you to use Zombicide zombies. We're more than happy to use anybody's zombies to play this, But this is much more, whereas Zombicide is a board game, this is, and this is much more a war game of zombies,
Now, when you say survivors, is that in the classic sense of anybody, or are we looking at, because I know, for example, at one point, Ambush Alley went down this route, but rather than looking at survivors, they were using teams of military personnel. So are you doing both? Are you doing mix and match?
So our survivors are made up of civilians, youths, average Joes, professionals, and elite, right? And so right. You can have a mixture of the two. So civilians, this is if you want to play the day it breaks out, but you're walking down the street and the thing hits. You have almost no skills. You'll be lucky to survive as a survivor. As a civilian, right? You're going to get hammered and you're going to get hammered hard, right? Because that's what happens on the first day, right? And then it takes off. And then the idea between the youths and average Joes and, professional and the elites. Now you're talking 2 or 3 months, if not 6 months into the apocalypse, right? These are people who have learnt either through dumb luck or natural cunning to survive, right? So in youths, you're thinking feral youths, These are youths that have managed to survive this long on their own, The average Joe is, they may have driven a cab or a digger or a truck and now, because of the way things have worked, they have managed to survive and learn a few skills along the way, yeah? And then your professionals, they tend to be the police, the fire service. These are people who survived the initial element, right? And then the elites are people that literally were in the military, right? That they were over in Afghanistan, they were in, or they might be old Vietnam vets, but they've got a mindset, right? So so the idea is you create your group, through a campaign method which is where you can buy anyone you want and equip them with weapons, etc. But there's also a few elements in there about how the campaign works, so that you get a few specialist skills, bits and pieces, and also you can start as youth and begin your experience. Every time you survive a game, you gain experience. You play it and you add to it. So you become better and better. You find more and more equipment. Because to start with, you're lucky if you've got a baseball bat, so you can, and just as with all good, zombie games, the best weapon you can use is a shotgun. But it's also singular loudest thing on the board and will bring zombies by the score. So, you have to play when do I pull the trigger and when do I decide to batter it, So it's all those kind of things. So what we've tried to do is keep as close as possible to the movie aspect of the whole thing. We didn't want to just take Skirmish Sangin and place it in the zombie apocalypse. What we wanted to do was write the movie aspect of the genre. So it's very much into, again, probably talking back to the kind of role-playing aspect to it, why it's not a role-playing game. It has probably more of that aspect because, you can just play the lorry driver who happened to survive this far. It doesn't all have to be a cop or a policeman or a soldier or, or the local sheriff, which is, as with, Walking Dead, but I like the concept of Walking Dead is, you got the old man who lives in the caravan, you got those people who through luck, judgment or whatever managed to survive this far. And that's what you can play, So yeah, we think people have a lot of fun with it.
That sounds really cool. Look, so that's coming out at Gen Con, which it'll remind me because it's not on my show radar.
Yes, it's the first weekend of August. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so once that's launched at Gen Con, when would you expect that to be out?
It will be available for sale on our websites the week I get home, which is the week after. So, and then it's just a point of shipping it around different places. But as the majority of it's coming out of the US anyway, it won't be a problem for getting it into Europe really quickly. So yeah, we will start taking orders basically when I get back to New Zealand. So, which is, I leave the day after Gen Con. So I'll be back here by the 4th or 5th of August. So, by the 10th, it will be available globally. So the idea is to get it out pretty quickly to people. And obviously, send copies to people like yourselves, etc., so they can either play and review and let us know what you feel, And obviously, just like with the others, it will have its own blog that we're supporting it. It will have its own social media aspects to support it. It'll have its own forum to support it, because we want people to be able to ask those questions, because I don't believe in silly questions because the amount of times I've read rules and not understood it, and then I've asked a question, they go, oh, it's like this. It's like, aha, right. So we want to be able to make it as easy as possible, and then get, people to be really interested in it. So again, what the idea would be is this isn't a standalone and forget it. It will have support. Outbreak is the concept of first of probably 3 or 4 books. Yeah. So again, and it's not going to be you need all 3 books to play the game. It'll be like we've done with Dispatches. There'll be additional rules, scenarios, etc. But you don't need them to play the game. So it's not one of these things I have to buy 4 books to play it. The game is all in the first book. The others are just nice to have as expansions, moving it around the globe, etc.
Yeah. So with that and the extra with Maalintii Rangers, it sounds like your workload is kind of like growing exponentially.
It has been a very busy year. Let's put it like that. A very busy year. Hence the reason I'm still laying zombies out. And it needs to go into production next week. So, I shall have a very busy weekend finishing this one off. So, but it's part of the fun. I mean, this is why we do it. We all like to work with the pressure. It's a bit of fun. We get to have fun gaming and pushing it through. And so, we wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy it. So, that's the way I see it.
Okay. So that's kind of mapped out this year. Now, as we were talking right at the beginning, you were saying, well, okay, one of the things with Skirmish Sangin was to produce a set of rules that were robust enough to work in any sort of modern combat setting. Any thoughts on where you're going next?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of fatigue in the US around Afghanistan and, shall we say, Iraq. So there's no point going down the whole enduring freedom path, is the way I look at it. I think where we'll be going next will be, and I'm just trying to think, I've got to be very careful what I say here because there's other companies I'm talking to. Okay. I think there will still be some definite elements looking at Africa. There will be some elements looking around where we go there. I think in the short term, there'll be more battle books. So we'll look at particular battles and produce the book for the battle, right? But then we might take it, I say might because we're in discussions. We might take it into particular areas like Asia or Africa or South America. Or even just open it up in any sort of different ways because the mechanics will work in any genre. That was what we designed it for at the beginning. So, yeah, that's probably about all I can say, to be honest. Sorry.
No, that's fair. Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Obviously, understand at times things like negotiations and stuff are still
and all these kind of things. So what we've tried to do is we've always wanted to pair up with other companies because we think you get a better product. Okay, so if we're happy to write rule sets for other people's miniatures, and that's what we've been negotiating recently is to write rule sets on behalf of other people because the fun for us is writing the rules while we have our own miniatures and we enjoy doing that. That's not our core element. Our core element is rules, etc. So we've been asked by a number of companies. We have created some things that are still in the wind. And we would hope they will see the light of day mid next year. So the idea is to work because I think the community has to stop being kind of as insular as it is and actually, work with each other. You've got a great set of figures and I've got a great set of rules. Let's come together. You've got, why not? Because it makes the job easier for everybody. And the guy at the end of the client, the punter, gets a better deal. So that's the kind of approach that we've taken to most of these things.
Very refreshing to hear, as we said earlier, because an awful lot of companies these days seem to be aiming a lot more down kind of, okay, we need to produce everything ourselves. It's all a one-stop shop. And so to hear, to have that sort of, attitude is nice and refreshing.
Oh, thank you. To be honest, I mean, the one thing I will say this is everybody that we've ever spoke to for advice, etc., in the industry have always been more than forthcoming. We've had lots of help. We couldn't have done this on our own. I mean, okay, from a design perspective, I've got that down to pat because I'm one of the owners of a design agency. That's never going to be an issue. Same with websites and all that kind of stuff. But there's other things, you've got to learn and process, etc. And we've been very lucky that we've asked people questions and they've come back and told us. Warlord Games were very, very generous with their time when we went to visit. We tried to pitch something to it that didn't quite work, but the concept was, we're open to ideas, and that mindset of an Empress is the same sort of thing. Of people working together, I think people are happy to do that. I think there's actually quite a good mindset in the industry at the moment, which is, I don't need to do everything. I don't need to own everything and lock it down. That people seem to be quite happy to help each other out. And I'm all for that because, there's enough of us. We all want more players, which is what we want. At the end of the day, we want more wargamers. The only way we can do that is keep offering different products. And I think if you look at the kind of products in the last 5 years, they've gone through the roof. Whereas prior to that, if it wasn't in the workshop mold, and I'm not criticizing workshop, there wasn't a great deal of movement. There wasn't a great deal of new things, But I think now you're seeing an explosion of new things because people are going, right, I can get this partially funded on Kickstarter. I can get this company to help me. And it's just, I think it's better for the punter. Yeah? All right, I'll get off my high horse
now. So going back to Kickstarter, you have actually reminded me. So as far as Maalintii Rangers is concerned, when's
That's
that
historical.
Kickstarter?
Good question. Next week or the week after? The reason I say that is because we're still tidying up a few pieces, and I'm waiting on some final costs from somebody. So I've got those final costs, then we'll launch it.
And then, of course, you've got the whole approval thing with going through Kickstarter itself and waiting to wait with them.
Yeah. So so if we get ourselves sorted by the end of the week, and they usually take 3 to 4 days to come back to you, we should be active from then on. And then so you'll see us through the social media, and we'll try and get it out to as many people as possible, and hopefully people will like what we're doing and support us. Regardless, Maalintii Rangers as a book will come out. Regardless, first set figures will come out.
Yeah.
Well, this is really about growing the products range to give everybody that really great. We've got buildings, we've got stretch goals for buildings, stretch goals for vehicles, additional figures. It should round it off for most people. But yeah, that's again if it gets funded. These things have a habit; they may or may not work.
This is it, and sometimes people complain of Kickstarter fatigue, but having said that, these days it is one of those things of at least you can judge your market, you can do a whole load of marketing and what have you, and it is such a flexible tool, isn't it? If
I was about to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think if you use Kickstarter for the best way to do it, and you also, you have a bit of notes and you think it through and you work yourself and you get everything up front about how it should be. Because, we've all seen those Kickstarters where people have naturally not really thought through what they're going to deliver here. And some of them haven't failed to deliver, which is a real shame. But, we've had people approach us and say, oh, I've got this great idea for a game. I'm like, okay. And they say, yeah, and I want you to create the figures. And we go, okay, well, this is the cost for a 3D figure. And they're like, oh, right. Because, it's very expensive to create one figure. And now you want a range of 24, suddenly it becomes really quite expensive. Yeah. It's that process that, some people I think haven't really done their homework. We believe we have.
Yeah.
I say believe because I've never done a Kickstarter myself previously, but I have produced books, produced figures, and I've got it to a global market. So yeah. I think we're okay. But I'm sure we will learn lessons doing it, because you always do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you said earlier, it really sounds like you've got your work cut out for you in the next few weeks between now and August with everything that you've got to do. I mean, I'm not quite sure how you're going to fit the Kickstarter in, get it all to Historicon and get to Gen Con and launch 2 games in the space of 2 months.
It will definitely be tight, but again, it's not just me. There's a team, myself and Chris, in New Zealand, and there's Chris in the USA, and there's my other team, Jen and John in the UK. So, all these people are all helping us to get across the line. So this is not just a Colin Phillips only thing. It's everybody's helping. And, we're pretty sure that we will deliver because, we've been to this point before. We're on the home run now. So, it should be good. But like you say, it's going to be a busy few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Well, in that case then, mate, especially since, you've got layout, you've got a book to finish laying out this weekend. I think it's about...
Well, he does have a whole day ahead of him, unlike us.
This is true. It is only 10 to 10 on Saturday morning. So, yeah, I do have a whole day yet to go.
Super. Well, Colin, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. When you can talk about other things...
Excellent. I'd love to do it. So, hopefully speak to you soon.
We'll look out for the Kickstarter as well.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, let us know as soon as Kickstarter's on its way and we'll put a note up on the blog and publicise it and everything, mate. So, so yeah, look forward to seeing that, mate. As I say, especially with, Somalia has a special place in my heart as that's what got me into modern gaming and, And so when I saw you were doing it, I was kind of, oh yeah, really looking forward to that.
Excellent.
So yeah, look forward to it, mate. Okay, all the best.
Cheers.
We'll chat to you soon. Well, that was interesting.
Yeah.
That was really cool. Especially since just after we finished recording the interview, I did turn around to Colin and say, "Oh, by the way, well, given your accent, are you from Birmingham?" And lo and behold, he is. So, a fellow Brummie.
Yeah. Can't be helped. No, that was quite fun. I have to say that I like the sort of semi-RPG approach to those rules quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
That, and I also grew up on Don Featherstone's Skirmish Wargaming book, so I know exactly where Colin's coming from for the whole flavour of those rules, and it's one of the books that I made a point of reacquiring when I got back into the hobby, and it definitely you can hear from the way he describes the system how much that's informed it to a degree. Yeah,
very much so. I mean that, and especially when he starts talking about things like RuneQuest. And then, which to be fair was certainly a system that was a bit of an acquired taste.
Well, there were enough people playing it at university when I was there.
Well, I think I personally, it was probably a better system than AD&D.
Skill-wise, yes, I had some issues with it, which were just based on the fact that I didn't like the setting over much. Yeah. It also produced one of my favourite comedy moments ever in roleplay. Young acolyte gets to do the ask your god a 7-word question, or a question which gets a 7-word answer. Very nervous, casts the spell to Lancor Mai, who's the god of knowledge, and says, "Is that you, Lancor Mai?" The GM, counting on his fingers, goes, "Yes, of course it is. Pause. You idiot." End of spell. So, I have to say, it's probably very sad that is my abiding memory of RuneQuest, but it is.
I like it.
But yes, there are some. While I wasn't a fan of the setting, there's the mechanics in RuneQuest were beautiful from the point of view of not leaving you in a system where your character sort of had graded steps to go up, and you could see, big chunks of getting betterness, whereas RuneQuest just let you go up by single percentiles, and had lots of nice. Some of the opposed roll systems were very nice as well. I really liked it.
Yeah, so it was really interesting to hear where everything was based from. As I say, and it was nice to hear it was, again, talk about Donald Featherstone as opposed to looking at things like, so often it comes from, people so often in this hobby come from the Games Workshop background. And to actually hear something coming from somewhere a little bit different, it's nice.
Yeah,
it makes a nice
cool.
change.
It's very cool.
And certainly with the Maalintii Rangers, that is, because as I said, that is the thing that got me back into, well, certainly got me into modern wargaming. And especially reading Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
And then getting the Ranger models from Britannia Miniatures. Britannia did a range of 28mm models at the time, which for some reason I ended up painting and then selling. I do not know.
Oh, you silly boy!
Why I ever sold them? I have no idea.
Because you really want them back now, don't you?
I do, very much so. Very, very, very much so. The Britannia Miniatures range was quite stylised because they have a sculptor that's that has a particular style in the way he does things.
Yeah.
But I've been through it. I love doing it, and I painted them all. And then for some stupid reason, I decided to sell them. Never mind. You live and learn. So it's one of those things of. I've done it on several occasions now where I've bought stuff, I've sold stuff, and then I suddenly realised I've got a bite again.
Yeah.
Did that with my Saga Normans.
I've never done that yet.
I'm impressed.
That's mostly because I have an awful lot of unpainted stuff sitting around still to paint, hence the pledge.
Cool. Right, okay, so on that note, I think we'll call that a wrap as a show. So
we'll see you for episode 150.
Indeed. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And indeed, we'll see you for episode 150.
Good night, folks.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you want to know more about Meeples and Miniatures, there are several things you can do. First of all, you can visit the website at www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. If you want to contact the show at all, you can email me at neil@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. You can follow the show on Twitter. Simply look for M&M Podcast or click the follow us on Twitter button from the website. We also have a group on Facebook. That's the Meeples and Miniatures Podcast Fan Club. Again, follow the link from the website. And finally, if you want to help to support the show, you can always donate to the podcast by clicking the PayPal button on the donate page, again found on the website. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope you've really enjoyed the show. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.